Okay, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today I have a really cool review for you from Grand Seiko. Thanks in part to Belmont Watches for lending this particular review model in. It is actually for sale on their site. We'll get into more of those details, a little further along in the review. But a little bit about Seiko. They were founded back in 1881. They're Japanese in origin and now have factories throughout Asia. They cover all market segments from entry level to high end. And this is an example of their high end division, Grand Seiko, which was founded back in 1960. In terms of the type of watch, I'd categorize this as an everyday dress watch. Some key characteristics and design, which you're looking for something within this space. Of course, you're going to want something that's clean, classic, with a minimalist design, and of course, something that's sensibly sized. This is the Grand Seiko SBGA211, also known as the Snowflake, and it is really a modern classic among Grand Seiko. It really helped Grand Seiko go international, and it made the spring drive movement synonymous with the brand's image. You can get this for $6,200 brand new, or you can get this nice pre-owned model for $4,650, and I think that is quite a nice deal. I feel like everyone kind of knows this model. It's so iconic. Like if you know Grand Seiko, you know about the Snowflake. So I was really excited to finally get this piece into the channel so I could share my thoughts with you guys. So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. All right, again, special shout out to Belmont Watches in San Diego. Now, let's take a nice close look at this dial. Look at the absolute beauty in this texture. It is so crisp. It's so subtle, but I tell you what, once you are looking, it's really hard to look away because of how gorgeous this is. And then you get in, of course, to the fact that this is reflecting off of a black camera lens. So all those high polished features are just going to render black. Just a reminder, it's only because they're reflecting off of that darkness. But you can see all of the polished facets are playing as I kind of try to change angle there as I hold this piece. Now, this is a 41 millimeter diameter by 12.5 millimeters thick and 48.8 millimeters lug to lug. It's constructed out of Seiko's own high intensity titanium. The sapphire crystal is a dual curve, so you can see very, very nice, clarity in terms of even at a very harsh viewing angle. Check that out. My gosh, still very, very clear. And this does have, of course, an inner AR coating as well. This bezel is polished, but it has seen some wear, as you can tell from the video there. It does have a screw down crown, which is nicely signed. And then inside, one of the nice things is you can actually see, since it has a display case back, you can see that beautiful spring drive movement. This is their caliber 9R65, and it'll give you plus or minus 1 second per day or 15 seconds per month accuracy. It has a 72-hour 3-day power reserve and has 4,800 AM of magnetic resistance. So very, very nice. Of course, it's a little bit different than a standard mechanical movement. You'll really notice that when you're winding it. It is definitely a very different feeling. Winding a spring drive movement, it's a lot grittier in feel. Versus kind of the more high-end you go, the smoother that crown action will be when you're hand winding, when you're thinking of just a purely mechanical traditional movement. Now, getting into the dial details here, of course, you have that beautiful snowflake texture white dial with the framed date there at the 3 o'clock. You're getting the power reserve indicator between 7 and 8, and you can see it has its own special texturing there, and it's quite iconic. Again, like this is just something where, maybe in the beginning, the early days of this watch's inception, some folks had to get used to that power reserve indicator, and now it's kind of a feature just because of how well it's executed. Look at the beautiful texturing there. It's just wonderfully contoured, and of course hyper gorgeous in terms of the finishing, the faceting. These these indexes look like they could be jewels, but they're actually just really, really highly polished pieces of metal. So very, very cool. Same goes for the handset. Look at those Dauphine hands, just beveled, just gorgeous. Now, getting into, oh, not to mention, very nice heat blued seconds hand. Let's appreciate that there for a second. Look at the beauty. Very, very nice. And that smoothness, unrivaled, guys. That is, it's not a high beat. It is just not vibrating at all. It is just turning. And then essentially there's a magnetic brake that is regulating the speed in which that is turning. So very, very cool. Now, with that screw down crown, you're also getting 100 meters of water resistance, or 10 bar, which is legit, right? Because your crown is screwed down, so you can really ensure that you're going to be getting all of that water resistance when you need it. The lugs are 20 millimeters, and they are drilled, as you can see here. And you do get this tapering 5-link bracelet with a milled folding clasp, and this does have a half link, as you can see. For sizing, everything is nicely milled, and this definitely feels really nice. It is titanium, so it's not super heavy. It is light, but because it is mechanical, it's still going to have some weight to it without feeling hefty. But at the same time, I don't think it feels tinny, because this is still quite a substantial watch. I mean, in terms of this bracelet, in terms of the watch case, the movement, of course, like, you're still getting a decent amount of heft there, but maybe not to what you would think of, when you think about, really heavy luxury. But I'd say it's not that far off from steel in terms of the way it feels in hand. It does feel lighter, but I guess that kind of makes sense with this bright, light aesthetic, the crispness. You think of snowfall and everything, and that crunch to it. It all kind of resonates within this design language. So with that said, let's actually, this is slightly too small for my wrist, but I'll still get it on wrist. It'll just be a little tight, but I'm not going to cut away. We'll just integrate this into one shot. So if you have a 7.5-inch wrist, you might be weary of this particular unit, because this is with all of the links that they have in there. It's a little tight, but you can see if I have it close to the camera, it's going to be it's going to look a bit larger due to some lens distortion. So what I'll do is I'll rest my wrist down low here, and then I'll just tighten up the frame so you guys can get a look at this, in more detail. But you can see it actually sits really well on the wrist. It's still nicely centered, not overly long. And then, of course, all of those Seiko / Grand Seiko contours and tricks to making this thing wear much smaller. It does. It absolutely does. I'd say it wears more like a 39 due to that smaller bezel and smaller dial, where things are being pushed more towards the center of the dial. So there's a lot of visual tricks, and then of course there's also the physical tricks in terms of the amazing casework, angular, high polished Zaratsu finishing there. Very, very nice. So with that said, although there is no loom on here, we can get into some low light transition and closing thoughts. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. All right, no loom, so I don't want to go pitch black, because then everything will disappear. But one thing I always like to work in, of course, is low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. Sometimes you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, maybe just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it's nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe even include some harsh lighting, which could, high contrast, which could expose any types of production defects. All you're going to see is a little bit of extra wear, maybe some smudging from, just fingerprint grease on there. But this is just beautifully done. Look at the hairline brushing, how uniform it glides. The light just loves the brushing on this piece. And then of course those deep just, oh my gosh, the polish, even though it's, you know, it's been worn and whatnot and really lived in, I tell you what, it is just still very beautiful, great depth. And you can see the dial itself, although there is no loom, due to the high contrast nature of this layout, it is still going to be very, very legible. Look at that, even with just minimal lighting there. So very, very cool, guys. Let's just appreciate that beautiful seconds hand sweep there. All right, fully lit. We can just enjoy the ASMR of a perfectly sweeping second hand and get into some closing thoughts, guys. On the wrist, again, it wears more like a 39 due to that smaller dial and bezel. Also, titanium is light without feeling tinny or cheap, so I think it's a nice balance on in this case. Sometimes the titanium watch can almost feel wooden. You don't get that feeling here. In terms of model variants, not necessarily applicable. There's, of course, variations of this type of watch, but you know, it's not like it's a different type of Snowflake variation. But in terms of comparable models, there have been many baby Snowflake dials, but you know, none that have really been able to match this same level of finely crisp texturing. I will say that now kind of the white birch is like their new Snowflake, right? It's in terms of just being, you know, a highlight of everything that Grand Seiko kind of embodies and within their newer lines there. But this was really the one that kind of got them over the hump, you know. One day this model will kind of be looked at as a modern cornerstone to the entire Grand Seiko brand. So definitely enjoy being able to purchase these below retail while you can, because we could easily see this modern classic transition from being a great everyday wear to being kind of a great investment commodity. You know, I wouldn't be surprised if years from now we're talking about the Snowflake reissue. You know, so I don't know. There's just something that's very cool about it, very cyclical about that, of course. But this is just such a lovely piece that can be worn thanks to its, you know, very thoughtful design. Fantastic execution means that it's going to be a watch you'd be proud to wear daily. And then, of course, the use of titanium really even boosts that. So they were kind of a bit ahead of the titanium game. I remember when that was actually, excuse me, some people's main gripe was they wished that it was steel because they wanted something that felt heftier. And now we're seeing you know, titanium becoming more accepted as a material to use within, you know, sports watches, dress watches, all across the board. And now you're seeing that, yeah, people are kind of cool with it. Now it's actually becoming sought after. So another cool thing is, hey, this has found a way to continually be contemporary and still have, of course, that great, just the movement, the dial, you just gotta add it together, the iconic, you know, Grand Seiko bracelets. It's just, this thing just screams Grand Seiko. And it's really one that, as a Grand Seiko lover, and I guess you could call me a collector, I have 2 Grand Seikos, I have tons of Seikos. This is one that belongs, you know, that can find a place in anybody's collection. And it's only a matter of time before I get Spring Drive into the collection. And, you know, it might be this one, who knows. But let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do hit like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.